No Caitlin Clark, but how good can this Iowa women's basketball team? Another impressive one, this time away from home, though a very partisan Hawkeye crowd. And how can you help out the Hawkeyes? We break it down today. Locked On Hawkeyes.
You are Locked On Hawkeyes, your daily podcast on the Iowa Hawkeyes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, welcome in. I'm Trent Condon, and this is the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast. Thanks for making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. We're available wherever you find podcasts. You can also watch us on YouTube. While you're there, hit subscribe. Just takes you a moment and helps us get in front of more Hawkeye fans and lets you know every time we have a new episode for you. Today's episode of Locked On Hawkeyes is brought to you by FanDuel. You can kick off the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers out there, you can place a $5 bet. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. We begin today with some Iowa women's basketball. We got some football talk. The weekend ahead, which is going to be a crazy one. Just a lot going on. Friday night, men's basketball team back in action. The Saturday game against Maryland, and what we're going to see at the quarterback spot, just a wild one. Of course, Iowa State on the wrestling mat. We'll get into that. And we have a little conversation about name, image, and likeness, NIL, and some ways that you can help out Hawkeye student athletes and do it in a different kind of way. We'll get into that coming up here with Kevin from Roy. But we kick things off with what we saw on Wednesday evening, an impressive victory for the Iowa women as they go out and they get the win against Kansas in really dominating fashion. Now, this was a Kansas team that was off to a good start on the year. They were 4-0 on the season, hadn't exactly taken on the who's who of college basketball up until this point. And there were a lot of new faces. Kansas had been an improving a basketball program on the women's side of things. They had a few real down years, but they felt like they were kind of trending in a good direction, had a good group. And with that 4-0 start, you're saying, all right, we'll see. Yeah, they're playing a bunch of mid-majors. You're taking on Lindenwood, Sam Houston State, Nebraska, Omaha, North Alabama, but they're winning all those games comfortably. New faces, but a program ascending, and I would just ran them out of the gym. I jumped out early, 18-4, and a couple of great takeaways to this one. We've talked about Lucy Olsen a lot, and yes, she's a different point guard than Caitlin Clark. They're all going to be different than Caitlin Clark, but there's a couple of things. First, if she shoots the basketball like she was tonight, she had that one, it wasn't a step back, kind of a step to the side three-pointer, was able to create a little space at the top of the key, move to her left, and knock that down. Lucy Olsen's not a great no, I should say this. Lucy Olsen in the past hasn't been a great three-point shooter. Her strength as an offensive player and as a scorer is off the bounce, pull-up game, those kind of things, getting to the rim. That's when she has been at the best in the past. But if she's able to knock those three-pointers down consistently, if she's able to go out there and hit an average of, say, 2 a game over the course of the season, this is big time because you can see how she can get there. And Caitlin Clark was so fun to watch because it wasn't just that she was a tremendous athlete, which she obviously was, but it was the theater of it. It was her getting a little hot and bothered every once in a while, her revving up to the crowd, right, and getting excited with that. So you had those components that were out there, and you had that part that I think got people excited. Lucy Olsen is different. There's a swagger there. There's also a softer side, if you will, a lot more smiles. And Caitlin would have smiles. That's not to say that CC didn't have that, because she did, but it's different and it's infectious. I loved also the shot of Jan Jensen, undefeated Jan Jensen, 5-0 in her coaching career. Seeing her holler at the bench, which it's crazy in its own right. I was talking with my wife tonight watching the game, and I'm just waiting for that first moment where Iowa really gets jobbed on a call, where Iowa feels like they're getting a bad whistle for a long stretch, and to see how Jan reacts. Jan Jensen seems like the nicest person in the world. And the interactions that I've had with her, the interactions that everybody that I know that have had with her, say the same thing. She's a great person. She's an incredible person. And she's an incredible coach. But there's also a part of coaching and being the head coach that is going to be different. She's talked about this. She knows it. She understands it. I just want to be there watching at the moment that it happens and see the way that that all plays out. But Lucy Olsen loved it. 3 of 5 from downtown. She looked excellent. Kylie Feuerbach, in a game where she didn't shoot the basketball well. She was not making shots. She was not hitting from the outside, and that's what she is. Good athlete, can be a good defender, but suddenly she started going to the rim, taking it to the hole, and being able to finish a couple of times through contact. I thought that was an eye opener for Feuerbach, and if they get that Kylie Feuerbach, look out. Addison O'Grady, good solid start out of her. Didn't get the same amount of touches, and Kansas really drop it inside and making it difficult on her. But the ascension that we've seen of Addison O'Grady, something we talked about a lot with this women's basketball team, has been excellent. Double-double from Hannah Stolke. She was really good. And then it was a freshman. I mean, in a game where you get very little out of Sydney Fulcher, still working her way back, and you can see that. She does the little things. She fouls out of the game. 6 rebounds, had a couple of tough player plays, right? That's what she does, and she'll mix it up a little bit. She'll smirk at the players. Sydney Fulcher, she's another one that is just an absolute godsend. Watching her play out there, the attitude that she brings, and doing it with a smile on her face. Love the way that she plays. But then the freshman. It was good to see Ava Hayden get going a little bit. That was great. We got Taylor McCabe coming off the bench and again hitting 3-pointers. Had another one late, had another one early. The 2 other freshmen, though, Stremlaw and Tegan Mulaney. This is a special group. This is a special group that has a chance to do, I think, some really special things. And that's kind of where we are right now. Are they going to win a Final Four? Are they going to win a national championship, get to a Final Four? I don't think so. I don't see that kind of upside with this team. But, I talked about maybe competing in the top third of the Big Ten, be a tournament team, something like that. Boy, I know it's against a young Kansas team, and again, don't want to overreact. It was a neutral court game, but it wasn't a neutral court game. We know this. And it was 90% Iowa fans, probably 95% Iowa fans. Not many Jayhawk women's basketball fans make the trip up to Sioux Falls. If it was a men's game, it'd be a different conversation. Might be flip-flopped. Not the case here. And another great part about watching this was seeing the fan base there interacting and not just filling out the building. Something that would have been, even in a gym as small as Sioux Falls, unheard of not too long ago for Iowa women's basketball. You're going to play a neutral court game and have the thing banked out. You'd be laughed out of the place. But now, here we are. And that's what it is. And not just for the game, but then afterwards. And the piles of people waiting for the players to come out of the locker room, waiting for that autograph. And it's not just because of Caitlin Clark. Caitlin Clark built it to what we see today. And that's the exciting thing. Because UConn women's basketball was not always an elite women's basketball program. Gino made them that. Tennessee, it was Pat Summitt. And though Lisa Bluter has retired, Caitlin Clark has put something together where the sustainability is there and the fan base is there. And you talk about those 2 fan bases. Tennessee, their arena seats over 21,000, and they, more times than not, would have more attendance for women's basketball than they would for men's. We know what UConn does and the way that they generate, and we can see the same thing happening here in Iowa City. You have to be able to sustain it. It's one thing to have a generational talent like Caitlin Clark and be able to build. But UConn was able to build from what they were, which was a really good program that won national championships and took it up with sustainability and then marketable star in Rebecca Lobo. And now we'll see. From Gustafson into Caitlin Clark, can they become a power year in and year out? This team has a chance to be good. They have a lot of different kind of pieces. I think there's more upside on them. It's an exciting time. Going to be a fun season. Now, Iowa will continue here. They are not going to be taking a layup. And as Iowa State found out this evening on Wednesday night, you can't sleep on anybody. They go up to Cedar Falls. They get beat by UNI. A top 10 preseason Iowa State team goes down. Not just goes down. They lose by a dozen in the McLeod Center. Iowa, well, they won the one at Drake. That's good. They'll see UNI a little bit later. Luckily, that one will be in Carver. Still coming up. Got a matchup against Washington State, Rhode Island, BYU. They have a matchup with Tennessee, aforementioned Volunteers, and that'll be coming up at Barclays Center on December 7th. And then the showdown with Iowa State on the 11th, the day before the men's game on the 12th. This team's good. And I know it's 5 games in. You don't want to overreact. However, better than I thought they were going to be, certainly at this point. Good win for the Iowa women. We'll continue here, Locked On Hawkeyes. Well, how can you help them out? You love the play of a player. You want to help them out. You want to, in today's age, give a little something, something. You could do that. We're going to explain it to you a little bit. We're going to talk about Roy. You've been hearing me talk about Roy. Return on you. We're going to get into it a little bit deeper. Kevin Tarca is going to join us. We will get into that as we roll through here. It is a celebration. Rapid reaction. Iowa wins over Kansas in women's basketball. Plus, we got some football talk coming your way as we continue Locked On Hawkeyes. Today's episode of the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast is brought to you by Skylight Frame. Look, I struggle finding gifts. I've talked about this with you guys quite a bit. It's just not something that I'm very good at. I can't make that right decision. I find something that nobody really needs. It's just a waste of money more times than not. And it's not just for my wife, my kids. It's for people, mother-in-law. They have everything already, and I get something dumb. And it's a disaster more times than not, right? Well, if you're like me, we have the perfect gift for you. Skylight Frame is a touchscreen digital photo frame your whole family will love. Upload thousands of photos from your phone and watch them appear in just seconds. So easy to use. The setup takes less than 60 seconds. You can invite friends and family to easily share photos via the free Skylight mobile app or email. No account, no subscription required to do that. And the touchscreen is an absolute game changer. Swipe through photos, tap to see new photos sent, tap the heart button to say thank you to the sender, and satisfaction guaranteed. They're so confident you're going to love Skylight, we offer free 120-day returns. And now, as a special limited time offer for all our listeners, get $20 off your purchase of a Skylight frame when you go to skylightframe.com/college. That's SKYLIGHTFRAME.com/college. Skylightframe.com/college. Get $20 off your first purchase now. Skylightframe.com/college. Today's episode of Locked On Hawkeyes is also brought to you by the FanDuel Sportsbook. Basketball is here. We got football going on. Hockey, if you're into that, they got you covered there. It's ready to tackle all that and more with the NFL action and also on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can bet $5. You're going to get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Iowa, currently a 6-point favorite on the road at Maryland. We know the road trips have not gone well recently, and I talked about this the other night. Team total with what looks to be what was formerly the 5th-string quarterback getting the start, Jackson Stratton. 26.5 for the Hawkeyes. Woo. You want to jump aboard on that? You can do it on the Sportsbook app with FanDuel. FanDuel.com is where you join, and you're going to get $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Trent Condon back with you once again here on the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast. As always, thanks for making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. And we continue our conversation in a different way. We got Kevin Tarca joining us from Roy. Return on you. Kevin, good to talk to you again. What's happening?
What's happening, Trent? I appreciate you having me on. This is great.
Well, been excited throughout the course of this season. We've been talking a ton about Roy here on the Locked On Network and getting kind of an introduction to what you guys are, what you're doing. Let's start right there. For people that are listening, maybe they're just getting up, want to find a deeper way outside of me talking about it for 60 seconds. Kind of what this is. The NIL environment, it's different, and it's different for old timers like me in my 40s and people a little older. My my stepdad complains about it all the time. If I hear my uncles complain about NIL one more time, they don't even know what it is. And they just complain about it because, well, they like to complain. But this is a different world, right? And the different world here is here and it's here to stay. So tell us what you guys do with Roy.
Well, first, I want to say it's a get to, not a have to, right? And so, like a lot of people that say, well, why do we have to give more money? Why do we have to support? It's like you don't have to do anything, but now NIL, you get that opportunity to to connect with your favorite athletes. So, yeah. So Roy, I appreciate the intro. Roy, the app has been live for a couple months now. We built a marketplace app to connect fans with athletes, which essentially allow fans to make direct payments to specific athletes. Right? We looked at the collective model, and although it's done a good job so far, and it's definitely raised dollars for sure, uh, Roy is a tremendous complement to that. Right? So collectives have raised dollars from really high wealth individuals and boosters and corporate dollars, but all across the country, no matter what level of school, they've struggled to bring in contributions from the everyday fan, right? And we built this to give the fan who might not give to a general fund or somebody who just wants to support and know exactly where their money's going. That's what we built this for.
It's funny as I was complaining about my uncles, complaining about everything. But I remember back in the day, my grandpa saying one time, I just like to buy that young man a beer. I would like to buy. Well, now you give them $20 after they can go out and have a burger, go out and if you're 21, have a beer, do those kind of things. You can do it very simply. I love the way last night we saw on the men's basketball side. I love the defense out of Drew Thelwell. Well, look, I work in radio and podcasts. I don't got a ton of discretionary income, but you know what? I love the effort that I saw, and I'm going to give him $20. I mean, it's as simple as that with what you can do at Roy. And well, if you got a little more, you can do a little bit more there. That's what I love about that. And you can do it to the individual player, not just into a collective. And who knows where your money really goes.
Without a doubt. And again, you said it, whether it's an athlete that you're one of your kids loves that follows, or you just we're really excited about a win and a game winning shot, or again, you just want to support your alma mater and a specific athlete, like you can do that, right? So it's as easy as um, it's really just downloading the app, right? And once you get on the app, you can scroll through all the different players who are on the rosters, and you can choose the player that you want to support in less than 30 seconds, and as little as $10 you can make a payment, right? And you can support this player as many times as you want to, whether it's a one-time payment or many times payment. And then at the end of the season, this is the best part: is you hope that support is felt collectively. And if the athlete that you supported leaves to a different school, then you get your money back. So it's kind of a risk-free way to support your favorite squad and your favorite team. Favorite athlete.
So another cool part about this is we also know even great players are leaving and leaving at a high clip. And we see this, it doesn't matter what sport you're talking about, high level players that are going on. Well, you guys have something a little bit different here with Roy that if a guy decides to leave eventually, well, your money's not going to go to them. They're not all of a sudden going to be sitting there at Illinois. They're not going to be sitting there at Nebraska catching your Hawkeye money going to them. That's not going to be the case with what you guys do with Roy.
That's right. And again, it's essentially risk free. And so you know exactly where your money is going, and you want to support the athlete who's on your team. It's pretty much that simple. And so there's an exchange of the content, and everything's compliant. But at the end of the day, we built this as a retention tool. And although being a former athlete myself, like athletes, obviously the reason why there is an NIL existence in the landscape, anyways, and so they do have a right to leave and to go where they want to. And there's all sorts of situations where coaches will get fired, or there's an injury or there's a family situation, of course, right? And they still have that option. But we're hoping that the retention model we built with the fan engagement is just another reason for athletes to want to stay out of the portal and continue to build their their brand profile in their communities and in their markets.
Talking with Kevin Tarca here as we take a look at Roy. Return on you about student athletes, the NIL space, and what's happening there. I want to talk a little bit kind of about the foreseeable future and the way things are always evolving, always changing, as well, everybody in the college athletics kind of trying to wrap their mind around it. But one other thing, and open up the show talking about women's basketball. we've seen the growth of women's basketball, starting with Megan Gustafson a couple of years ago, leading into Caitlin Clark, and just how incredible it's been. I've been a pretty big fan of women's basketball for a long time. One of my roommates at Iowa, his wife was part of the staff for a number of years. So I've been watching for a long, long time. And I remember when they had curtains up at Carver Hawkeye Arena because nobody's coming. Well, not the case anymore. There's 15,000 strong in there every single game. So it shows you the growth potential that is there. How about, though, the growth potential of women's sports? It doesn't matter what trade sport magazine you're reading. They're all talking about the growth of women's sports, what you guys are seeing on the NIL side of things with Roy.
Yeah, well, I think there's two main storylines here that I want to talk about, and you said it. The growth in women's sport has been, let's say, long overdue and always there, right? But the two storylines, one is that there's a big disparity in NIL payments, right? Total aggregate amount between men and women, and so you have situations where you're reading at these different schools where funds raised by the high wealth boosters or corporations go entirely or almost entirely to men. And again, like, it's a free market, and so there's going to be differences at certain levels. But I'm reading a Washington Post article that talks about an SEC women's basketball player and her teammates that earned a combined, it was something along the lines of $400,000 in NIL between a couple of seasons, whereas on the men's side at that same school, they had not been to the tournament like the women's team had. They had not been to the Sweet 16, and they earned about 5 times as much. And so, that's that main storyline. There's a pay gap that exists between men's and women's earnings at nearly every school, and so we believe Roy can help that. And the second one is, it's been interesting to do some research on this. There's a disproportionate deliverable expectation to where, the types of deliverables for men happens to be much less, which again, every situation is different for sure. But, men seem to have higher sums for minimal tasks, whether it's meet and greets or, autographs, and women have more content creation type of expectations, which is pretty interesting. And so again, Roy can help. Roy can help, and that's one thing that we're trying to do here is, allowing fans to select specific athletes to support ensures their payments go to that specific athlete and not just a general fund where if you want to support the women's team, it might end up at a men's team. And same thing goes if you want to support a men's player, like, you wouldn't want to give to a general fund that might go to a different team. And then again, I think just financial empowerment for female athletes, as mentioned, that total number is not where it should be. And then lastly, I guess I'll say, I know I'm going on a long tangent here, but the deliverables, right? Like, the deliverables is really interesting, that disproportionate deliverables. And so on Roy, the deliverables are the same for everyone. Doesn't matter what sport, doesn't matter what, whether you're a male or female athlete. Fans can pay how much they want, and everybody has that same deliverable. So it's a true free market in every sense of the word.
Love that part of it. See what's happening in Congress. I'm not smart enough to understand what's happening there. Goes above my thinking, and I read a Ross Dellinger piece, and I say, well, I need a little more coffee after that one. So explain a little bit, with everything happening, both on the government side, college athletics, trying to figure all this out in this ever-changing landscape of the NIL era. What do you see kind of in the foreseeable future over the next 2, 4, 10 years, whatever it is, how this thing is going to continue to evolve and just try to maybe wrangle it back in, or is a cat out of the bag this week, this point, and it's just going to be the Wild West going forward?
Well, the cat's out of the bag, and it's definitely not going back. That's for sure. But I don't know about the Wild West moving forward. I think, just first as a disclaimer, I am not a lawyer, and second as a disclaimer, I think if somebody tells you they know exactly what's going to happen, they're blowing smoke up your what, right? Because no one really does, right? We're waiting on this federal court case now, and so essentially, what it was agreed upon was that, hey, the NCAA for way too long has been taking way too much money and not sharing profits with the athletes who are essentially the key stakeholders and what drives everything. That's just at the high level. And so, now it's preliminarily approved, this court case, the House settlement, which is not going to be fully approved until, I believe, April 7th. But what the gist of it is that, there's a certain percentage of revenues that schools are going to have to share with athletes moving forward. And so, that number might tweak a little bit, but, there's going to be millions of dollars that go back directly into athletes' pockets. And so the question now is how schools are going to distribute that. What are the rules on Title IX, and what they can and can't do? But at the end of the day, what it really truly means is that there's going to be a place for you know us and Roy. We can play a really big role there, because there's going to be X amount, call it a salary in quotes if you want, that certain percentage that schools are going to give to athletes, but there's going to be that market outside of that, right? Like, that is really the free market. So whether you're getting money from a collective right now as an athlete, or you're going to get money from a distribution from a university, that should be the floor. And anything above and beyond that, from fans or from brand partnerships or whatever you do on your own, should be the ceiling.
It's incredible what this is doing, how much it's changed, and how it will continue. But Roy is going to be there helping these student athletes get a little extra in their pocket, and really changing the way that we look at NIL and the direct payment to the player that you want, instead of just going into a pool and you see what happens with it. Hey, Kevin, enjoy the conversation today. Greatly appreciate you jumping on. Very simple. I downloaded the app. Had to help out one of my buddies' kids that was on the team with it. That was my first investment that I made there on one of my players. Mentioned a couple of guys that have been catching my eye. We've been doing the Roy Player of the Week. There's been money that's been going into their accounts. Really, really cool. What's the simplest way? People just to download the Roy app?
Absolutely. Download the Roy app and scroll to your favorite athlete and make a contribution. It's as simple as that.
Kevin Tarca with Roy. Kevin, appreciate the time. We'll talk to you again soon.
Thanks so much, Trent. Appreciate it.
That is Kevin joining us here on the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast. Well, we got a little bit more coming your way here, Locked On Hawkeyes. We're going to get into a little football conversation as we get ready for the matchup against Maryland. What do we expect out of the Terps? A wild weekend ahead. It's Cy-Hawk on the wrestling mat coming up this week. And boy, what has been, speaking of weird off seasons, it's right there. We'll do that continuing Locked On Hawkeyes. Today's episode of Locked On Hawkeyes is brought to you by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the best place to get real money sports action, and you can join over 10 million users and sign up today. Prize Picks invented Flex Play, means you can still cash out if your lineup isn't perfect. You can double your money, even if one of your picks doesn't hit. More or less. Simple as that. Just think of somebody like Justin Jefferson. All right, the Vikings are taking on my Bears this week. Wife's a Vikings fan. I'm a Bears fan. More or less 83.5 yards receiving this week. Very simple. How about Lamar Jackson? Bounce back performance, more than 1.5 touchdowns. You can do that and a whole lot more. Football, basketball, they got you covered on Prize Picks. I love the app. It's super easy to use, and you can jump aboard as well. Download the app today. Make sure you use the code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, download the app today for Prize Picks and use Locked On College. That's the code Locked On College. It'll get you $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game. Prize Picks, run your game. Appreciate Prize Picks for being with us here, Locked On Hawkeyes. Back with you one final time on the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast. And thanks for making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. All right, tomorrow, we got to get into this wrestling match a little bit deeper. I'll be honest, watch who do they wrestle? Stanford on Saturday. A little bit of that. And I knew the new faces, the transfers, the two guys from Arizona State coming in. It's just weird. We just got done talking with Kevin about NIL and the transfer portal and just how different it is. And maybe I'm more used to it in football. You know, Iowa football 2 years ago, they went after hard with McNamara and Nick Jackson and on and on and on. The sheer number of guys, and they get Caleb Brown, and we get excited about that. And Seth Anderson, and so we had that, and it was kind of almost an onslaught of it. Like, oh yeah, this is really happening. And then the men's basketball side and what we've seen there. It was disappointing that all of a sudden we see Thelwell and Traore and how fun those guys have been. Oh, all right, maybe this portal, it's not just about having the most money. Indiana football, maybe Iowa basketball. You have that component. Lucy Olsen comes in. Oh, all right, we get a player that was third in the country in scoring last year to replace Caitlin Clark. This is pretty dang good. And I guess I just hadn't seen it at the same level on wrestling, and that's why it was so weird watching that match against Stanford. going through and looking at some of the early season results and then looking at the projected starters for the matchup against Iowa State this weekend. And I'm a pretty big wrestling fan. I'm not the biggest out there. I enjoy wrestling. I grew up in Osage. You got to be a wrestling fan if you grew up in Osage, right? Um, and it was weird. Simple as that. Doesn't mean I'm going to cheer less. You just don't have that same involvement with the same wrestlers. I guess that's college athletics today. Again, we'll dive in a little bit deeper into the matchup against Iowa State. We'll do that on the Friday show and start to preview that a little bit more. In fact, I might make a call to somebody that knows the wrestling a little bit better than I am to do that. We'll set the scene for the weekend. That Utah State matchup, they're averaging over 100 points per game on the men's basketball side. That's going to be incredibly fun. We got a lot going on. Oh, yeah, football. Football, by the way. One final thing. I mentioned this at the end of last show, and I just talked about it for a couple minutes. The Kirk and Brian Ferentz thing, it's weird. Going back to Kirk's comments again. So I mentioned it here. What did we talk about it for maybe 2 minutes? And I said I didn't want to overstate what it was. And then I talked to a couple of people at work. And the more that I talked about it, all right, I'm not crazy here. Because look, I'm doing a show every day. We're looking for content. We're looking for stories. And there are times, yes, I don't want to say manufacture, but you take a little something and you make it bigger. And I don't think I was doing that with this. However, maybe it's also being minimized. Kirk has that weird quirk. Kirk has that quirk, easy for me to say, where he doesn't like to say people's names when he's mad at them. And going through, was there a little bit of that? I mean, he starts talking about Barry Alvarez and Bill Snyder. He's asked about his son. I don't know. I could be making a mountain out of a molehill, and I hope I am. But it just struck me as odd. We'll leave it at that. Thanks for being with us and making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. Thanks to Kevin Tarca for joining us again from Roy. Download the app and help out your favorite student athlete out there. You know the money is going directly to them. That is a great thing. We'll talk to you again tomorrow. Go Hawks.